It should be going on.
Okay, are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, members. Everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good Scrutiny panel meeting on the 12th of October. Any apologies?
There are, Chair. I'm just getting them. Up a minute. Thank you. We are. Yeah, Councillor I think Councillor Hutchinson's subbing for yeah, and there's also Councillor Tremaine for, is it Councillor Swift?
Councillor Smith.
Smith, yeah, Smith.
So
Apologies,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we've got Councillor Hutchinson subbing. Yeah,
And who's subbing for Councillor Smith?
yeah.
I am Angie. Diana.
Hello, Diana. Just looking everywhere. Thank you. Okay. So Stuart's manager, members' interest. Any members got any interest to declare? No? But I'm reading off the agenda, guys, because I can't do what yous do. Admission to the public.
All items are open, Chair.
Okay. Minutes of the last flood scrutiny meeting held on the 16th of December to be agreed and corrected. Could anybody second that? I wasn't there, so I can't. I've read through it.
I'm not sure if any of the members are actually present. I'm trying to, I think we may have to accept the minutes.
Accepted and approved. An overview of the flood programme. Item 5.
That's Neil Fernley, Chair.
Neil,
Initially.
over to you.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll try and share my screen. Bear with me because I'm more used to using Teams these days. So I'll need to get permission to do that from the host. Would that be you, Janet? I'm getting a message, host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Janet, are you able to let Neil share his screen?
Anybody able to do it? Otherwise, I'll just talk through the report.
Neil, sorry to jump in. Is it possible someone can let Granville in, please? He's in the lobby. He's got poor connection, so got kicked out again. Thank you.
Okay, is anybody working on the sharing screen, or shall I just sort through the report without it being on the screen?
I think if you make Neil the host, he'll be able to share his screen. That's probably the easiest way.
Janet, if on top of share screen, there should be a little button, like a little arrow going up. If you click on that, it should say options or something, and I think you can then go in and give others permission to share. It should just be on the right hand side of the share screen.
Okay, so
tab.
just that. Right, okay. Yeah,
If you stop sharing your screen,
sorry about this. I'm trying to get to where I can stop share. Yeah, right.
so
Yeah,
now next to share screen, there should be a little icon thing.
Yeah,
It should, if you click on that, you should be able to go to options and then give others permission.
it's not giving me that.
Do you have that?
I'm gonna Hosanna.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
If you want
Hosanna,
to, yeah, that's fine.
Hosanna, I've made you host. Can you make the share screen, please? Because it's not showing
Yeah,
up on there.
yeah, that's fine. Neil, if you now try and share it, should be able to share. You should be able to share it now.
Okay, I think we might be there. Is that, tell me when that's showing?
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
see that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I think it's probably just easier if I just zip through the report. Not sure just how many people have got it open to the side, but at least as I talk you through it, you'll know where I am. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity of giving you an update on where we are with the programme. I think it's probably that appreciation that today we've got quite a lot of new members to the panel. One or two I think may have served on the board before, so some maybe a little bit more familiar than others. But on the basis that probably there is limited knowledge, then hopefully this overview gives you some background to it. So hoping you perhaps had a chance to have a read through it before, but as I say, if I kind of just pick up one or two of the key points as we go through. In the background there, just talk about the structure that we've got for the Flood Recovery and Resilience Partnership, various agencies that form that, and we come together under the Flood Programme Board chaired by Councillor Swift. There's a diagram at the end, I think, which probably nicely shows the structure. I've always been quite proud of this little simple diagram. So at the top we've got the board. Below that, we have a group of senior officers from the different agencies that come together quarterly. It's a similar time frame that the board meets. And then below that, we've got the 5 operational groups. So Resilient Infrastructure, chaired by the Council, Reduction Investment Group, chaired by the Environment Agency, the NFM Group, chaired by Yorkshire Water, and the Community Resilience Group, chaired by Katie, who's our community representative. And then we have the comms group that sort of sits and supports each of those 4 kind of operational groups. And then to the side, we have the Flood Scrutiny panel, the role of which is to hold it to account the work of the board and the various operational groups that sit below it. So that is, in essence, is the role of the group today. So as I say, bearing in mind that some of you got a more experience and knowledge of what we do than others, I've just really given a snapshot of the work that is carried out underneath each of the operational groups. So first one there is around the reduction in investment. And as you can see, a lot of the engineering schemes that are ongoing are delivered through that group. So Mythe and Royd scheme, which completed recently, and we had the opening ceremony a couple of weeks ago. Next major scheme in its most advanced stage is probably Hebden Bridge flood alleviation scheme, with works, the main works starting next summer. Errington Hillside and Stummin Home Road, which also feature within the same area. And then we've got the likes of Brighouse, which again is reasonably well developed, and some of the early work starting there in February next year. And then we've got a couple of schemes at the early stages, Walsden and Sowerby Bridge flood alleviation schemes. And then another major piece of work ongoing, which again you'll be probably familiar with, is the reservoirs storage, which working very closely with Yorkshire Water on trying to see what the potential is for flood reduction measures by lowering the level of the reservoirs. And a kind of reminder in there that over, I think probably 3 out of the last 4 winters, we've had an agreement for doing what we call a trial drawdown of 10% on those reservoirs. Granville might be able to give us an update at the end, but I suspect at this point in time, the reservoirs are looking quite low. So we'll need to come to a view as to whether we actually do that through this winter. And then the flood reduction programmes, phase 1 coming to an end now. One outstanding scheme at Park Road, which is still under review by the various agencies. And then the phase 2 programme, which is ongoing, and kind of a list of the sites that are involved in that one. Excuse me. And the programme funding. So yeah, sitting behind all those very large schemes is the sources of funding, which we work very hard on doing, and we do get good support, I think, nationally to help with that one, particularly this booster funding, which kind of sits outside some of the normal flooding avenues. But as I say, we've done quite well there, so compliments to the Environment Agency, particularly for delivering on that one. Through the Natural Flood Management Group, probably the key piece of work in terms of delivering schemes on site is around the grant scheme that we've had, where we inject about £500,000 into a scheme and invite applications from landowners to come forward with proposals for NFM measures. We've run 2 rounds of that already, resulting in 25 schemes being delivered. And we've got a surplus of, or a residual sum of about £70,000, which we put a 3rd round out, and we're just reviewing those schemes at the moment with a view to getting those on site as soon as possible. So a bit of information there about the community groups that support this work, which we couldn't do it without them. They really are key to delivering the works. I think our role as agencies is about really trying to facilitate their work and trying to help bring in funding streams where we can. So quite a lot of work going on, and probably just flag up the interventions that we've mapped on the interactive map, which is now available online. So that's kind of really interesting, I think, just to see what opportunities, what work has been completed. And then there's also a separate map looking at the opportunities of NFM that can come forward. So if I float along community resilience, so Katie had a hand up before, I noticed, so it's a key area of work for us, working within the community and really supporting the work of the flood groups and the flood wardens, which have really increased in numbers through the years since 2015. And through this group, it's an opportunity for them to come together and share ideas and again look at funding opportunities, training opportunities that might arise from that. The group supports the promotion of resilience grants, which we've had certainly after 2015 and after Storm Ciara in February 2020. A lot of work in that area supported by the business team within the council in helping to deliver some of those grants. Work goes on with public health on supporting vulnerable groups in the community. And this is a piece of work which had stalled somewhat, but now with the, I'd say the relatively new director, I think she just joined as COVID hit, so her work has been cut out, but we've had some really productive discussions with that team recently, so we're really getting back on track with that piece of work. The emergency planning team is very important in terms of setting up the virtual hubs, which I think thankfully we've probably not needed to use through the pandemic, and we can start to get back to having live hubs. And these are the ones that are set up in key communities, along the valley when the flooding situations arise. Yeah, a couple of things in there around flood insurance. I think this is one which is kind of close to home, really, in terms of homeowners and businesses trying to get support for their insurance through the flood re. which I understand that's due to be updated soon. So hopefully that will make that a little bit more accessible. And then insurance for the flood groups again is a challenge, both the ordinary insurance, but particularly through obtaining public liability insurance. So again, these kind of areas that the scrutiny panel might be interested in. And touching there on the mental health support as well, where we've supported with £40,000 contribution to the work that the Community Foundation for Calderdale were previously doing in contract with Healthy Minds. So that's come to an end now, and that is sort of one of our challenges really, is to see how we might be able to support that again in the future. Through resilient infrastructure, this group first came together after 2015 on doing the major recovery works after the Boxing Day floods, when, if you remember, there were canal bridges at Ellen to be rebuilt and a couple of other canal bridges and landslips. So some really big civil engineering projects which finish now, but then we get our reminders through Storm Kira in February, and the Environment Agency have done a lot of recovery works there. Probably the most high profile one being at Shea Chapel in Todmorden, where unfortunately the chapel itself had to be demolished. But I've not seen the site yet, but I believe that that's looking quite good now, and is certainly supporting the school, which is adjacent to that. Northern Power Grid, relocating electricity substations, these are the kind of things that probably just go on under the radar, really, unless we report on it, but really critical to make sure that we have got that resilience in place to keep the power supplies going should we get any future flooding events. And then maybe some of the more day-to-day stuff, our own flood team at Calderdale. We have a couple of assistant engineers constantly dealing with flood incidents and investigations on a minor scale, the kind of things that affect one or two properties, but again are critical and are almost continuous every time we have a rainfall event of any type of magnitude. Section 19 reports that we're obliged to do under the legislation, we're moving on with those, and the flood risk asset register is a key document that we have. It's a legal requirement to produce that, but it's key for us, particularly in Calderdale, where we've got a lot of third-party owned flood assets, old mill ponds and the like, under private ownership, which we have situations over the years where we've had some kind of failures of some of those critical pieces of infrastructure. So they're quite time consuming for us and incur funding when, even though they are private assets, then we nevertheless often end up having to step in under emergency powers to do some works on there to protect properties. And then sitting behind that, the communications, we're blessed here with having full-time communications officers who support the climate change agenda as well, and they're able to put together some really imaginative pieces of work for us. So the newsletter, I think, is a good example, whereby it used to be a bi-monthly publication, but because of all the work and information available, then we've been able to do that as an online monthly newsletter. So, and I think it's really good in bringing home, and I often learn one or two things myself when I read it. So a really good piece of work. New platform for the Eye on Calderdale website, and I think that's coming to fruition now, and I hope you'll see some improvements when you log on that in the future. I'm getting a message my internet connection is unstable, so hope you can still hear me. So that, I think, summed up the various pieces of work being done by the operational groups. In terms of the reports, options available, what can you as the flood scrutiny panel get from this? I think possibly acknowledging the work carried out is one option, suggesting improvements that can be made to support the programme and the ongoing work, and identifying aspects of the programme that you might wish to scrutinise in greater detail at future meetings. So hopefully this kind of snapshot gives you some information that you can think about there. And then in terms of the standard report, climate change is always one of the areas that we look at, and without doubt the work going on the flood programme contributes to the climate emergency. Just looking at the kind of the four leading tasks there around air quality, protection of people and the moorland, flood defences, biodiversity at risk. The work that we do really contributes to each of those. So it's highly significant in terms of addressing climate change. And just making a note there under 5.3, how we also can consider climate change when we're looking at the design of the flood defence scheme. So different scenarios of climate change increases are taken into account within those as part of that process. So that really is my report. We've got the chairs, I think, of all the operational groups with us, so along with myself, hopefully we should be able to answer any questions coming out of that.
Hi, Neil. Can I just ask a question, please?
Yep.
Hi. Firstly, thanks for the report. Under the 2.3 flood reduction and investment, down on flood reduction scheme phase 1 in terms of Elland, have we got any progress on, you know, what's been reviewed and why? It's unaffordable. Have we got any progress on that?
Yeah, the Park Road Allen scheme.
I'm finding it difficult, really, because, you know, people of Park Road, I did bring this to the attention at the last meeting that we had in terms of insurance. These people have now been told by their insurance that they're uninsurable now. You know, and if we're not, if we're thinking about pulling Elland out of this scheme, because that's how that's reading to me, unless there's been a progress on the review.
Yeah, well, as it says in there, we are reviewing the scheme. Joe's on the call, so Joe can kind of support me on this one. When we've looked at the original scheme, which was about trying to retain the Calder in channel, the flooding mechanisms there, as you'll be aware, is that the Calder overflows into the canal and then comes out on Park Road. So yeah, the scheme to try and retain it in channel, and some of the impacts that it had on other properties by raising the walls, it created problems with properties that didn't previously flood. So when we kind of had to factor in some of the mitigation measures around that, the scheme was coming up towards sort of £1 million, which when you look at your funding sources for the relatively small number of properties that it protects, then when we put the business case together, it was sort of simply unjustifiable and unaffordable in that sense. So what we're doing now is just coming together as the agencies to see what other options there might be in the area. And we have got a review meeting that is being set up between the agencies on just to agree the way forward to see what other options we might have in that area. So that meeting is being arranged. It's imminent. But it's only when we've had that we'll be able to provide any updates from that.
That'd be absolutely great. And if I can't attend that meeting, could somebody just take forward to that meeting? You know, we're talking about, you just mentioned the amount of money there. These people are uninsured now because, and I'm sure that their insurance claims due to the damages, not just to the properties, but, you know, we're talking about their mental health as well, far outweighs what it would cost in terms of being part of that phase.
Yep, yeah, I certainly take your point on board. I think we are appreciative of that. The meeting I'm talking about is just within the agencies, but obviously we'll be looking to give you some feedback once that meeting has taken place.
We can't measure misery with money, can we?
Sorry, say that again?
I said we can't measure misery with money.
Yeah, that is a challenge, but there are certain criteria that we have to address to justify the spend. So it's we're trying to find that right balance there. So really about seeing if there's
You broke up there.
an alternative scheme that.
Do you want me to, sorry, we're losing Neil. So hi, for those that don't know me, I'm Jo Arnold and I work for the Environment Agency. Apologies, I don't know how to put my hand up. I've forgotten how to use Zoom after using Teams for so long. So yeah, so I've sort of been involved in Park Road Elland pretty much since 2015. And, you know, as Neil explained, unfortunately, once we took it through the earlier business cases, it was unaffordable. However, following the scrutiny panel in 2020, ourselves, Calderdale Council and Yorkshire Water all made a commitment to revisit the scheme at Park Road Elland, sort of recognising that there was a need to reduce the flood risk in the area. So since then, we have done some further modelling, which has taken a bit of time, and we've sort of included what's been happening sort of upstream, downstream as well. And what that modelling has shown is that even if we reduce the flood risk from the River Calder, there is still the challenges or the issue of water flooding as well. So again, it's a commitment from the organisations to come together to reduce flooding from all the different types of flood risk. So the meeting that Neil's talking about is actually on the 21st of October. So and to sort of communicate from that is the next steps. I think there is a commitment from ourselves for the Environment Agency to progress to the next business case again, looking at all of the aspects of flooding. And then we just need to sort of agree resources and timescales to be able to do that. So very much Park Road Elland is very much on our radar as well. And Councillor Scullion's got her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
You
Have as well.
So Councillor Scullion and then Councillor Press.
Thank you, Chair. What the officers haven't said is that actually we're in there fighting in the various different forums and flooding meetings in terms of making sure that Park Road and Elland is not forgotten. Not easy because of the way the criteria and the formula work in terms of number of houses and number of businesses, but we really do have it in our sights and we're going to keep working. And as you know, it takes time to get the money for these schemes. Look how long it took in Mythenroy, but it really was worth it. And we did get there. And we're having to take a longer view than we expected to take. And I really do, feel for the residents in terms of the time that it's taking, but we're really in there fighting for it. Can I just say something, Chair, about insurance though? The government say that the flood re-scheme of insurance should make sure that insurers cannot walk away from individual domestic households who are finding it difficult to get insurance. They have a responsibility to make sure that everybody has got the insurance they need. However, as we said when we were lobbying the minister who visited recently, that actually the difficulty is that for many people, the actual premium, the premiums, of course, but I can't know what the word is for it, the money that you have to pay out before the insurance kicks in. There's a special excess, that's right. The excesses are simply too high. And we asked the minister when we met with her in Hebden Bridge to take this issue up again, because you're absolutely right. It's all very well offering insurance, but if you quite simply can't afford it, then that is just no good at all. And we'll continue to press and lobby on the flood re-scheme and its unsuitability really for the circumstances that people in a place like Calderdale, which floods more frequently, finds itself in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. Time, yes, I can appreciate. Thank you very much. Councillor Press.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on a few things. First of all, I just wanted to pick on the Shade Chapel thing. Mine was one of the 250 homes that flooded, because Shade Chapel was literally about 300 yards from my house. So although it didn't flood in 2015, it did flood in 2020. So thank you for the work that you have done. The two issues I wanted to sort of pick up on, one was, yeah, it's on flood really. I obviously have to pay flood and it's very expensive and it's a bit of a stretch. And the sad thing is that the houses at the bottom of the valley, which tends to be the ones which are the ones which are affected, certainly in Tomaden, the ones which are affected, also are the areas really where people are less likely to be able to afford to get their homes insured at all. So I think we've got a real problem. We've got a real problem because we've also got the Cambridge Street, Industrial Street at the other end of Tomaden. You've got that area where a lot of the homes are rented. So I think we need to put pressure on the government, and I'm sure you are putting pressure on the government. But it's a situation which I think is very, very difficult for people, because it's the most vulnerable who are finding it hardest to pay this insurance if they can get it at all. The other thing I'm concerned about was the mental health issue. I know there was a test siren last week, and there were vans, the Environment Agency had vans going around saying this is only a test, but I know it caused an awful lot of anxiety in people's minds. And don't forget also, since we had the original floods, 2015, 2020, that was then followed almost immediately by lockdown. So, you know, our people in the Calder Valley have now had pretty much 6 years, going on for 7 years of additional stress. So it worries me greatly that something like Healthy Minds, which have done an awful lot of work, suddenly no longer have funding. They have no longer have funding. So, and I know from being on the flood panel, not the scrutiny panel, the overarching one, we've talked over and over again about mental health and how important it is. It seems, are we not forgetting that if we're cutting funding to something like Healthy Minds? And can we not do something? What are we doing to replace that? Finally, I'm really pleased about the Penny Eastwood bursary. So can I ask, so it's the mental health, what are we doing? Are we going to just let people be cast adrift? I'm sure we're not. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Perhaps I can come in on behalf of Neil and Joyce Isaac here, the Flood Resilience Partnerships Manager. We are working within our Health Directorate, the new director there, Deborah Harkins, and we have scheduled a meeting for some time towards the end of November to review that issue. And previously, besides EA and council funding for Healthy Minds, the department, our Directorate of Health, had also funded Healthy Minds with some funding that they got from the Southwest Yorkshire CCG. Now, the idea is to have a conjoined approach with the CCGs, which are merging into the new ICG. And until we meet, you know, it is on our radar, and we are keen to make sure that we find some funding going forward. And perhaps Joe Arnold, you could add some points to that.
Sorry, just come off mute. I think you've covered it all, Isaac. I think between ourselves with Calderdale and Katie as chair of the Community Resilience Group, it's very, very much on our radar, and it's something that we talk about regularly. You know, and Katie might have more to add to this as well, and we are looking at securing funding to offer other services. As Isaac said, you know, we funded Healthy Minds through booster funding that ourselves and Calderdale secured after 2015, and we've just had the report back from that, and actually the amount of people that they've managed to reach is really quite amazing, and the amount of now sort of groups and drop-ins that they have. I can't remember what the actual stats were, but we've actually included it in the recent infographics that we pulled together for the 5-year anniversary of the production plan. And yeah, it's really impressive. So we are aware that the need for it, and we're very
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but why was the funding cut? And it's great talking about it, but what kind of timescale? We're now going into the flood season. What kind of timescale are we talking about? This funding has to be replaced.
So the funding wasn't cut. It was the funding that was allocated by the Flood Partnership Board. I can't remember, probably at the beginning of the whenever the project started. So it's now for the partnership to look at securing additional funding to continue with that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Parson-Hunts? Councillor Dickinson, I'll bring you in just straight after.
Thank you, Chair, and it's great to see how much fantastic work has been done. And I mean, I'm quite new to this panel, as a lot of people are here, but obviously because we all live and work in this area, we see the amazing work that's been going on. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Press. I work in mental health, and absolutely we need this funding to support the people in Calderdale for their mental health. there is a lot of money coming from the government at the moment for mental health services, as I'm sure you're aware, you know, because it's very much on the national agenda. So I am, you know, fantastic, Joe. You know, the work that you've been doing is brilliant, but we need to be able to carry on. I would definitely second Councillor Press's comments. I've just got a question for Neil. Is he still with us? I can't see.
Neil is back. Neil is back, and he says he's got an intermittent connection.
Okay. Hi, Neil. Thank you for your report. Thank you. My question is, I just remember living way further down the valley than I live now, and knowing about the third-party assets that do collapse, and you know, some of these things are just lying around in people's fields. You know, and I remember a wall collapsing and all that water coming down towards Hebden Station way back in the first flood. Now, I mean, my partner works in Calderdale River Trust, and he's nothing to do with flooding or anything like that. But I hear lots of conversations about being able to access third-party land is a real nightmare, you know, and being able to. I noticed in 2.6 where, you know, you've mentioned the registering of flood risk assets. You know, have we actually have we already got that list? Does it exist? And B, who's responsible for that list? So if it's third-party asset, you know, who's holding this? Is it the Environment Agency? Is it Yorkshire Water? That's two questions. And then when is this asset plan going to be in place? Just so we've got an idea about planned maintenance, really. Thank you.
Okay. I think first of all, we do have the register, and it's a requirement of the council to hold that register. So we do work with the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water to understand what the flood risk assets are. And then what we do from there is to put together a management plan. And that would involve doing regular inspections. Well, first of all, perhaps identifying the critical assets. So by critical, that will be the ones that if they fail, they're going to have most devastation from a flood risk point of view. So we would identify those, and then we would put together a method of inspection of those. Through the asset register, we have a record of the landowners, which is sometimes easier said than done. Sometimes it's quite clear who the landowner is. Sometimes you find it's on somebody's land, but it's actually owned by somebody else. We had one of those quite recently with a reservoir dam that was failing on us. We couldn't find the owner. We knew the landowner, but we were able to sort it out. But as I was saying before, those are costs that fall on ourselves rather than the landowner whose duty it is to maintain that asset. So, as I say, from that, the inspections and the knowledge of the owners, we can then, if it's falling below a standard, we can then work with the landowner to make them aware of that and to put measures in place for that. So obviously there's quite a lot of discussion and negotiation goes along in those. It sounds quite easy to say like I'm talking about now, but you know, there is so some landowners, I suppose, are a bit more willing and able to work with us than others. So that's really how we go about it. So what we're looking to do is to put together an actual kind of the written management plan that we can then share with the Flood Programme Board, and then obviously that will be available for Scrutiny panel to look at as well. But we do have the asset register, and we do publish that. That again is one of the duties that we have under the Flood and Water Management Act.
So in that case, then, is it that there's some funding for those? So say a landowner has got an asset that is at risk. Is there some funding that they could apply for, or something that they could actually access, so that, you know, because it's a lot to ask, isn't it? If I don't know, maybe somebody is not in a financial position to actually look after that asset. You know, planned maintenance is not a cheap thing. So I presume that they can apply for funding, can they?
It's probably not that easy, in all honesty.
Or are they responsible for financing that?
They are responsible for it and the funding and maintenance of the asset. So, you know, it's very limited what we can do as the council, given the limited funding that we've got available. So it would really be incumbent on the landowner to find a means of funding it themselves, and obviously we will give any support that we can in that manner.
Right, okay. So if we come across residents that have assets that are at risk, then, and we wanted to signpost them somewhere, there's nowhere for them to access funding currently?
None that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Can we make a note of that, please, Chair, that it would be useful to have a list of funding, to, you know, whether it's, I don't know, some third party sector or something, places where landowners can go to get funding to manage these assets, if that's possible. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm sure that's been noted. However, just a little thought from myself. If we've got funding for landowners, then we should find funding for Park Road. People that are paying mortgages, people that can't afford their insurance. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll be guided by you as to whether this is the right forum for this question. I'd like to ask a few more details for the Wellham Park Brickhouse attenuation scheme. The last time we had flooding in Brickhouse, that attenuation was Tesco's car park. So I was wondering about it, if this is the right place to ask for a bit more detail as to what the scheme comprises, since it got mentioned in the minutes in the report. Thank you.
I'll defer to you, Joe.
Neil.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so I can give a brief overview of where we are with the Brickhouse scheme. So again, the Brickhouse scheme has been an interesting one, primarily because the way that we have been funded is to better protect property, so homes, and a lot of the beneficiaries of the Brickhouse scheme are businesses. So the partnership have been successful in securing funding from the Combined Authority, from European funding. So we are now in a position where, as the costs stand for the scheme for Brickhouse, it is fully funded. And it takes on a few different aspects and areas. I think one thing to say is it's not going to be as shiny and as new as Mythenroyd and Hebden, because a lot of the work we need to do is on the Calder. So it's behind all the businesses, so repairing the walls, so there's so just to bear that in mind. Then again, we're also going to be looking at replacing some of the temporary permanent defences that we've had in, so doing some work on Phoenix Bridge and also at the Rocked as well. And then the third part of this scheme is doing some attenuation and slowing the flow above Wellhome Park, so on Clifton Beck and also within the park. So because Brickhouse was so badly impacted by February 2020, we reran the model again, which again has put sort of a 12-month delay on the project. But what it has meant is that we've got now a much better understanding of the flooding mechanisms. So previously we've kind of kept our eye on the Calder, but now we're sort of more aware that there is the issue also from Clifton Beck. So we've got a temporary gauge on there now, which is monitoring all the flows. So we've got some actual sort of science to work with. And we've been working with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and also with Calderdale Parks about what the actual park will look like. We're aware that it's used for park runs, that you have fairs there, that it is very, very much a park that is used daily. And sort of the initial designs was to make it almost into a reservoir, which we knew would not be acceptable. So it's now sort of about smaller, but maybe more interventions and maybe remandering, can't get the word out, of the actual Clifton Beck itself as well. So having like a second in the park next to it. And then, as I say, doing some more natural flood management, working with natural flood upstream to slow the flow as well. That's kind of where we are. We've got our outline business case assured now, so that gives us funding to go through to full business case. So the next 12 months will be very sort of busy consulting with businesses. We've already started talking to a number of businesses along the Calder and councillors and interested parties as well.
Thank you. If I could just follow that up quickly, as far as residents are concerned, I suppose what my big worry is really is that with the work that's been done at Mythenroyd, will push the problem further down the valley, which of course is Brickhouse. And the residents that I can think off the top of my head who are going to be most at risk are those folks down at the bottom of River Street, where the river goes off one way, where the navigation starts to kick back. Well, actually, the navigation ends and the canal begins again until we get down to Cooper Bridge. And I was down there chatting to residents a couple of weeks ago, and they do look vulnerable, I think would be the word to use, to what could be coming if, as I say, if what's effective at Mytholmroyd then gets pushed down the river towards us.
So just with regards to River Street, there is going to be some storage, like some surface water storage that's going into that particular area to better protect those properties. With regards to increasing risk elsewhere, legally we cannot do that. We cannot push the risk further downstream, or rather further back upstream, depending on what we're building. And you know, there's an example. Well, Paul, I've got Paul, my colleague, here on the screen with me, with regards to Mytholmroyd, where actually by building that the flood scheme, it did increase the flood risk slightly to some properties in London Foot. So we had to mitigate against that. So there's examples where we have increased flood risk, also made sure that we're making sure that risk is back to how it was by the work that we're doing as well. We just wouldn't get through our assurance process if we were through the modelling, if we were demonstrating passing on flood risk elsewhere. And we get an awful lot of and rightly so, very happy to answer questions like this, but from councillors, MPs down in Mirfield and in Kirklees about the work we're doing in Calderdale and how that might impact them. So so it's our assurance that we won't be passing on the risk elsewhere.
Right, thank
Paul,
you.
I don't know if you think about that at all.
Yeah, that's okay. I did raise my hand, so I did it formally. Just echoing really what Joe has said, that we don't have a duty to build flood defence schemes, but we do have a duty for when we do build something to not increase risk to others. So Mytholmroyd's a really good example in that we've raised and raised walls in the village, which did pass on flow and or increase flood risk downstream, for example, at Brearley and London Foot. So we had to put in additional measures at those two locations. Again, raising walls and raising walls, in fact, and some property flood resilience to individual properties like flood doors, etc. But beyond that, the increase in risk dissipates. So right at, and I can't, Katie will be able to tell me the name of the bridge at London Foot, but beyond the road bridge, I'm going to say Victoria, but I could be wrong. The bridge there, the flood risk is dissipates and it goes, and that's what the detailed modelling shows. So there isn't any pass on flow, any increase in flood risk from the Mytholmroyd scheme, and certainly not down to Brighouse.
Okay, Councillor Scullion, did you want to come in?
If I may quickly, first of all, I did actually forget to give Councillor Patience apologies. He's got a work commitment this afternoon. He sends his apologies. I'd like, with your permission, to pass on the issue in relation to mental health and healthy minds to him, because I know he's been dealing directly with that, and he will come back to you and the committee, if I could take that away. The other thing is just to be clear about the question of assets and long-term plans for assets. Yes, we do, and it's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and we have the occasional wrangle with the Environment Agency in terms of, once a piece of work is completed, who actually has the ongoing maintenance responsibility for the asset. So it's something that's very much to the front of our minds. But I would make the analogy with comparison with unadopted roads. If you live on an unadopted road, you do know that between you, you'll share the cost of doing up that road, and the council does not have responsibility for that. If you've got some sort of drainage system on your land that belongs to you, then the council, that is your responsibility and that of the neighbours. But nonetheless, as Neil has indicated, when there is an emergency, for example, there's either an orphaned asset or there's an emergency where we can't trace the owners, we will make sure that people are safe. We move in those circumstances. But it is like an adopted roads. If you buy a property and it's got those kind of assets on it, you have a responsibility to make sure that you look after it. And I know it's been a problem in Calderdale in the past. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Press?
Thanks for that, Councillor Scullion. I just wanted to say that we only have 2 scrutiny panel flood meetings a year, so that if this is going to be referred back to Councillor Patient tonight, it's just something I've already raised with Councillor Patient, and I think others have too. So I would really appreciate if we could get a swift response on this issue, because I can't stress this enough, that I am really, really concerned about this issue regarding mental health. I'm somebody who's suffered from these issues myself, and I make no apologies for saying that. Yesterday was World Mental Health Day. So can we please politely ask for some kind of update and response to that issue regarding Healthy Minds? Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to talk amongst yourself, you can do. I'm just looking for my agenda.
Can I just make a comment? Sorry. Yeah, it's Chair of Community Resilience. I just wanted to be clear that the Healthy Minds issue and the insurance issue, as most people know on this call, are at the top of the agenda for that group. And it comes up in every single meeting that I'm on as one of those things that needs to be dealt with. So, and through the Community Resilience Group, we did secure that money to allow Healthy Minds to continue. And it's not a stopping point for us. We're exploring other avenues, as Isaac mentioned, through public health at the council. But it's not a dead end. I will keep on with that, and the same with the flood re-insurance. I'm insured at my property here with flood re, and I know it's expensive and I know it's an issue. And when we had the Minister visit, it's one of the things that a number of us brought up, because it's not just householders, it's more of an issue for businesses, that because flood re doesn't cover that. So I'm keeping close eye on what flood re are doing at the moment, and it concerns me. I wrote in the chat that there's residents in Ellens that can't get insurance, because as Councillor Scullion mentioned, flood re is there to provide a level of insurance for people that they're comfortable to pay. It's not meant to be an uninsurable situation. That is their primary goal. To make sure that residents are insured against flooding. So that I would be interested to know why they can't obtain insurance through flood re, and what pressure they've put on and questions that they've asked. Because I know within flood re, the insurers that are ceded to flood re, they don't all insure people that have been flooded. It's not just because they're on that list, it doesn't mean they insure householders. If you are very close to the river, a lot of them already will not offer insurance, even though they're part of flood re. So that is another issue that has been brought up within my group. But yeah, I just wanted to give you some confidence that it's something that is going to stay on my agenda, and I will just keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Katie. In terms of the residents that have been told that they are uninsurable now, they've only just this year been paid out for the floods that happened 2 years ago. 2 years. And then they've been told that they're uninsurable. They're across the road from the canal. Granted that the river bursts further up, just over the Ellen Bridge. But they are vulnerable. They get it each and every time. But 2 years on, they've only just been paid out, and then to be told that they're uninsurable. And if they're not insurable, they can't afford the excess and they can't afford the monthly insurance payments. Thank you. Okay, I think we're on now. 6, is it Mytham Road Flood Alleviation Scheme?
It is, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know me, I've already spoken, but I didn't introduce myself. I'm Paul Swales from the Environment Agency. I work in the same team as Joe, and for Joe, I'm the Senior Flood Risk Advisor in the team. And I've been the area lead for the Mytham Road Flood Alleviation Scheme. As Neil mentioned earlier, that the scheme has now been completed, and we had the grand opening on the 1st of October. But as with any project, what we've done is try to learn lessons from that and record them. Some good lessons, some not so good, some things that we could improve. And the idea is that we share those lessons, we share that learning and experience, and bring that to future projects. So what we've done is quite an in-depth process, which I'll run through, and I'm certainly not going to cover every lesson that we've learned or experience that we've experienced, but I'll give you a bit of a flavour of what we have found with the project. So in terms of the process, we've undertaken a series of workshops to really fully understand what's gone well and what could be improved. And in those workshops, we've had, clearly it's been a long process, because the concept of the project was after the Boxing Day 15 floods. So it's been 5 years to get to where we are now. So we've had changeover of project team members. So we had an initial workshop with current project team members and past. But then we also held 4 separate workshops with our delivery partners, so Volkers, or VBA, but Volkers and Atkins in particular. So Volkers are our contractor and Atkins were our designer of the project. And we broke it down into four separate topics. So design, technical, contract and commercial, site operations and management, and comms and engagement, which was really, really important. We also, we had a stakeholder group of key members of the community, and we had an open discussion with those as well, to in particular around the comms and engagement side of things. Again, what went well, what not so well, what we can learn from. And then we also gathered feedback from our partners, particularly Calderdale Council, and then also internal Environment Agency teams, so teams that you probably didn't see, but we're working behind the scenes, our legal teams, our estates teams who deal with compensation or land purchase, etc. So basically there's been a lot of work, a lot of people involved in the project, and we've gone through quite a thorough process to try and eke out all these different positives, negatives, and what things could improve for the future. The general themes, if I just move on. Oh, but I suppose one thing I do need to say is that there will be a full report coming out, which we'll share certainly internally, but also externally, so our partners can see the report, because it's really, really important that we do learn from this major project. But in general themes throughout the life cycle of the project, there's been some real things that have gone well. I think Councillor Scully had mentioned that the 5 years it's taken, but actually, clearly that's a long time for construction and what have you to take place in the heart of a community. But actually, it's been an incredible achievement to deliver a project so complex, so constrained, in such a short space of time. A project of this size in such a constrained environment would usually take about 10 years. We've taken 5 from a standing start. So it has been an incredible achievement. Also, I think we've built some excellent relationships with the community, and dare I say it, made some friends along the way as well. Clearly, not 100% of the community have been happy, but overall, I think it's been positive. And again, also went well. We built some excellent relationships with partners, particularly Calderdale Council, many of who are on the line now. And also just overcoming some of the real challenges that we faced through the project, such as keeping Burnley Road open. Should I say. Clearly there's been issues with traffic management along the way, but there was a potential of having to close the road to facilitate construction of the walls, particularly around where the new bridge is, and diverting the sewer. But I'm sure some of you, or if not all of you, drove through the chicane through the fire station forecourt. So some of those challenges, and we've had water main bursts, the coronavirus pandemic, you name it, and the serious flooding in February 2020, you name it, the project's overcome this. Throughout the project, though, not everything has gone brilliantly, not smoothly. As I mentioned, the pace at the project's been delivered. It was all came about because of the government commitment, and the speed of the project has really impacted all parts of the scheme. Also, which didn't go so well, because of the duration of the scheme, and again because of the speed, the consistency of the team has changed throughout the project. We've had numerous project managers. I replaced someone, different project execs, and what we found was that the community really liked continuity of staff. So that's something that we're trying to work on moving forward. Again, linked to the pace of the project, quite a lot of out of hours working was undertaken, again, to try and deliver the project at pace. But again, that had its knock-on impacts and clearly affected the residents in the heart of the community. Very early on, the resources were underestimated as well, because we didn't realise, I think we had about 48 hours turnaround from when the government commitment said you were going to deliver this project and start construction in 12 months. Clearly, we didn't really know what we were building at the time. I think it was a walled solution, but things changed quite quickly as we moved through the process. So the resourcing wasn't quite right at the start. And really, there's already been quite a discussion around mental health, but the well-being of the project team needs to be taken more into consideration around the pace of the project. Really high stress levels within the project team, hence why some of the project team changed at times. And then finally, just about clear understanding of roles and responsibilities, again linked to changing project team, people coming in not quite sure what they're doing. So that just gives a bit of a flavour of what went well and what didn't go so well throughout the project. But then if I just split it down into the 4 themes, again, not going to go through each one individually, but just I've highlighted some of the areas where within each of the themes where things went well or not so well, but what we can learn from it as well. So bullet point 1 in design and technical, I mentioned the pace of I'm going to keep mentioning the pace of the project, but the design, it took actually only 1.5 years, where a normal project would take 4. And it was really, really key to have the designer and the contractor working together in the same location, along with the Environment Agency as well. So that collaborative approach was really key. I've already mentioned it about the well-being of the team. And in the early stages, they had something called stop and take stock sessions to just really sort of take a step back and see how everyone's doing. And they went well to begin with, but they stopped. Don't know why, but again, possibly due to the pace of the project, but it's something that in those high pressure, stressful situations, it's something that we need to continue doing. Just moving on to contract and commercial. Bullet point 1 about the risk workshops. All projects have risk, and you try and manage that risk as best as possible. But at times, the workshops that were being held, the group got very unwieldy. There was a lot of people involved, so a more focused, streamlined group would be beneficial moving forward into other projects. Bullet point 2, just around efficient work. So clearly the pandemic's been very negative on lots of aspects of our lives, but actually the project has been slightly more efficient working remotely. Not having to go to the office. You can, like we're doing now, Zoom meetings, team meetings, sharing screens. It does work, and it worked pretty well with this project. Theme 3 around site operations and management. Again, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, Volker's introduced many different measures so they could keep working throughout the pandemic. Simple things such as staggering start times, lunch breaks, for example. Also having sort of lanyards with beepers on. So if you got within 2 meters of someone, it would beep, so you'd move away. Also having twice weekly lateral flow tests, and all these little measures meant that the contractors could continue working through the pandemic. And there hasn't been one case on site as a result, or there wasn't one case. Should be talking historically now, but there wasn't one case of COVID on site as a result of those measures that they put in place. So that was really, really good work from them. And then just the second bullet point there around the health and safety steering group, and Neil was involved in this group. I think we met monthly, and that was where the project team, the delivery partner, the designer, partners would meet and discuss any health and safety issues as part of the project, and could iron them out pretty quickly and address them quickly. But the lesson learned from here was around that the steering group didn't start until well into the construction period. Whereas looking back, I think it would have been even better for it to be at the beginning of the project. And then the final theme, the one that I'm most involved with, is around the comms and engagement, which was really key and fundamental to this project. Just picking up on a couple of the bullet points. The third one, visibility. Real lesson learned here is around what we call the flood information centre. So right at the early stage of the project, we had a couple of cabins in the Mythenwood Community Centre set up, where people could come in, ask questions, look at plans, etc., for what the scheme was going to look like. But eventually that did move out of the community centre car park up to the compound near the sewage works. And I think in hindsight, we should have kept it in the heart of the village, because it would have got more footfall, because where we did move it to into the compound, it wasn't as visible, it wasn't as central for people to come and visit. And I think that's something we're going to certainly take away for the Hebden Bridge scheme, looking at a flood hub in the heart of the town centre. And then finally, just the bullet point 4 around community involvement partnerships. I mentioned it earlier on throughout, but I think we've built up some excellent councillor relationships and the key stakeholder meetings. But a key thing for me was embedding ourselves into the existing community meetings, which I think all projects should do if they don't do already. So that was the London Foot Ward Forum one, the Royd Regeneration, really being visible, being open to challenge, open to questions. I think it ended up was usually the first item on the agenda, to be honest, and showing visualizations of the project, whether that was progress of photos using PowerPoint, or I think the most successful bit was using drone footage, so having a different view. But overall, just to summarise, incredibly challenging project, delivered in a short timescale, albeit 5 years, but one that we're very proud of. Continuity of staff is key to the community. Virtual working does work. Building relationships with the community and partners is key. The well-being of staff needs more consideration. And yeah, just to reiterate, if I was to pick a couple of things that I would do differently, keep the flood hub in the heart of the community. And this is an interesting one, that I think managing expectations of the community early on in a project around the pace of delivery, and that the scheme won't stop. It's not, these schemes aren't designed to stop flood risk altogether, but what they do is reduce the frequency and the impact of flooding. So yeah, that's a key message that I would be keen to take to all future projects. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Paul. Very in-depth report. Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, probably a silly question, but as far as community engagement is concerned, I'm guessing that the good folk of Mythenride and areas are fully aware of the fact that these it's a flood management scheme rather than a flood elimination scheme.
That directed at me. Yeah, yes.
It's so, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I would say the majority are. I think there's always more that we can do with regards to. I think it's a really difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it's more about communication. Really, is the message getting across that it isn't going to prevent flooding in Mythenride? It's going to reduce its. Yeah, it's going to attenuate it somewhat. You know.
It should be, and I think there's various avenues which we can explore to get that message across more, whether that's with our flood resilience teams. So they're the ones who do sort of the alerts and warnings, etc. And someone mentioned the siren test earlier. And I think I would argue that we put it in our messages, that when we've communicated, whether it's press releases, bulletins, keeping you informed documents, and we'll continue to do that in future projects, because it's, like you say, it's not about, we can't stop nature. Nature will find its way. And building walls, yeah, it's great. But that is really the last solution. We're looking at other alternatives as well, sort of the catchment wide approach. So natural flood management, storage on reservoirs, personal resilience as well. That's really important, that people know what to do when they do receive that flood alert, flood warning. It gives people more time. So there's a whole raft of things that we should do more of. We need to promote more of. And it's, will we ever solve it? Not sure. But will we continue to work to improve it and get those messages out? Yes, we will.
Yeah, managing expectations, I guess, is the summary of my question, really. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Chair. Given the duration of the works, which spanned a number of winters, were there any thoughts given to the events of 2020, February 2020, when the scheme was progressing towards completion but wasn't complete, and whether the work that had been done offered any way to better protect the area, than actually happened?
I'll take that one as well. So I think whether we communicated this as well as we could have, but until the scheme was completed, which was only recently, the majority of Mythenride was still at its previous, what we call standard of protection. So before Boxing Day 2015, it had a very low standard of protection. I think the onset of flooding was I'll say the 1 in 5 year event, or we put that in percentage terms, that meant a 20% chance of flooding in any 1 year. And up until completion of the project, and certainly around the February the 9th flooding, that the area was, or Mythenmoyd village, other than perhaps around the Shoulder of Mutton pub where works were complete, that the village wasn't at any better protection, because a lot of the work, so for example, on the 9th of February 2020, upstream of White Houses, if you know where that is, work had not started there, and that's one of the lowest points. Clearly, we know that the temporary defences that were installed, we've acknowledged that those were deficient. But because of the severity of the event, unfortunately, Mythenmoyd would have unfortunately flooded anyway. But yeah, I think the short answer to your question is that they weren't at better protection, if that makes sense, because there were still areas that weren't under construction.
Right. And there was nothing that could have been done to, to increase protection through that winter.
No, because the problem is, and it goes back to one of the earlier comments, is around passing on increased risk to others. So we talked about Ludden, Foot and Brearley. If we'd have completed all the areas in Mythenmoyd and not completed the Brearley, Ludden, Foot areas, there would have been an increased risk, and then there would have been a big issue around sort of liability of passing on flood risk, which is something that we can't do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Just quickly there, just 1 second, Councillor Passenhorse. Just one question here, Paul. So when you talk about passing on the risk to others, would that have an effect coming down the valley to Elland?
No, I think I'll go back to some of my previous comments. Oh, sorry, are you referring to the February flood event? Okay.
So all the defences that are in place at the moment, what type of risk does that coming down the valley towards Elland, Brighouse?
If all the defences are in place?
Yes.
None.
Oh.
And the reason I say that is, but I'll go back to, I said something earlier, is around that we have a duty. Sorry, we don't have a duty to construct flood defence schemes, but we have a duty to not pass it on to others. Hence why we had to do work, because originally the scope of works for Mythenmoyd was just in the village itself.
Yes.
But because it turned out that we needed to widen the watercourse in 2 key locations, build up, raise, strengthen walls, it increased risk downstream, because you were passing on more flow through the village to Brearley and to Ludden Foot. Hence why we had to do that additional works at Brearley and Ludden Foot. Beyond Ludden Foot, and there's a bridge, and I'm going to say Victoria Road Bridge, but I can't remember if that's correct. But beyond there is no impact or increase in risk as a result of the Mythenmoyd scheme downstream. So Elland, Brighouse, Sorby Bridge, you name it, there is no risk or increase in risk as a result of the project. And that's the same with any project that we do. We can't increase risk to others.
Thank you, Paul. That was actually the answer I was looking for. I obviously didn't make myself clear. Okay. Councillor Passenhorse.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, I just want to say congratulations to you and all the team. I just think it's absolutely amazing what you guys have done, and to Calderdale Council and all the councillors involved. It's just been a huge, huge stress on our communities. And I just think it's amazing that you've turned this around in 5 years, and it was really refreshing to hear that you spoke about the mental health of the contractors. I think very often they're the people who get missed out in some of these situations. So yeah, it's great, that you're looking after the staff and the well-being of the people who are in this. I know it was really, really stressful for some of them, and there was a lot of angry people sitting there in queues of traffic and the things that they had to deal with, and it's it's fantastic. So congratulations. That's my first comment. Secondly, I've got a question from a resident who lives further up the valley. It's up in Todmorden, I think. Let me just get this question. So they there's been problems, I think, is it on Cambridge Street? And she's wondering if there's anything happening around the Mill Bank, Commercial Street and on Halifax Road area. Is that something that you're familiar with? Is it part of a scheme, a project in the future? Thanks.
I'm not.
Do you want me to?
You can. I was gonna thank the councillor for all the praise. Go on,
yeah.
Joe. You go first.
Yeah, so you may be familiar with a group of schemes that we call flood risk reduction schemes. So there was a number of those that were sort of agreed between ourselves and the council after, I think it was the 2012-13 floods. And then, yeah, so some of those were completed. And then we've done a second round after 2015, which includes the likes of Sorby Bridge, Copley, Shorewood Road, Walsden. And as we're calling those sort of Group A. And then we've got a Group B, which does include, I think it's Commercial Street around that. So we've got initial assessments done, so we've kind of got a better understanding of what the risk is, but we need to do more to actually develop the business cases, and we're not looking at progressing those probably until the start of next financial year. So I'll be honest here, they are some way off being developed, and you know, there's a number of reasons behind for that. There's resources, there's funding, there's the sort of level of risk as well for the communities. So yes, so there's I think we've got, well, off the top of my head, I can't think of where they all are, but there is a number in Tomberton and a few else in the valley as well. So I think.
Okay, so something is happening. It's just not happening just yet. You're still doing the business case for it. I'll feed that back. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome.
I think it's fair to say that you'll be seeing the Environment Agency in the valley for a number of years to come. So
I'll let them know.
Thank you, everybody. Any more questions for Paul? Lovely. Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Good work. Okay. Future meetings and work planning. Senior Scrutiny Officer.
Well, thank you, Chair. Although it's got my name by the side of it, this is really an opportunity for members of the scrutiny panel to suggest items for the next meeting in the spring. We've got notes of, well, obviously we've got a recording of this because it's gone onto YouTube. 2 people were watching when I looked, so we've got a number of issues that we've been talking in the background about reporting back in the, you know, by written report in the near future. But really, it's an opportunity for members to suggest anything in particular, and then myself and the Chair, Councillor Gallagher, and Neil will get together to work out how that can go forward.
Yeah, can I just say firstly, you know, for the to go on to the agenda, I'd like to keep on the agenda the Elland being reviewed. We may have something that hopefully some good news for the Park Road scheme. So I'd like to keep that on, please.
Good.
The press.
Yeah, could I also request, Mike, that as the Deputy Chair of the Flood Scrutiny, you could also keep me in the loop? And obviously, I would like and I am concerned that we only meet twice a year. Therefore, the issues that have been raised tonight, and I won't repeat it, if we could follow those up as a matter of urgency and have a report back at the meeting in the new year.
Yep.
Councillor Parsons, Pulse.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would like to second Councillor Press's idea that we would definitely keep mental health an agenda item for the next meeting, and I would also like to see a register of the flood risk assets that we were talking about before, because very often these are in our community that maybe they're not, because we don't own them, they're not necessarily something that's like it is our responsibility, but if one of them goes pop, we are all going to know about them. So I would like to see that register coming forward, if that's possible, please. Or just to see where we're up to with it anyway. so that planned maintenance can be put in place. Thanks.
Yeah, totally agree there. Anybody that's able to own land, I would imagine, and we have been told that the council do work well with them, but it would be nice to see a little bit of enforcement then.
Yeah, I mean, just give you an example. This weekend, a part of the Leeds and Liverpool Canal has just burst, and it's 26 miles or 28 miles, something like that. It's a huge amount of water, you know, and I think it's very often we just walk along these canal structures or these rivers or whatever, and we don't realise these things need maintenance, and there's a whole team, an infrastructure behind that, you know, that does all this work. But on third-party land, I think, yeah, we really need to keep an eye on that. So yeah, I just want to put that back on the agenda if that's possible, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill?
Yeah, I just want to come in on that point and just sort of caveat, certainly from an Environment Agency point of view, we do asset inspections on third party, and it's mainly sort of culverts, you know, that sort of would have an impact on flooding, on river flooding. What if we deem that asset not to be fit for purpose, we would then write to the holder, the riparian owner of whatever that culvert, bridge, whatever it may be. However, we cannot share details with others because of GDPR.
Of course.
So I don't. So I'm sort of like caveating that we wouldn't be able to provide a list of these are sort of the issues that we've got on certain fences, unfortunately. But rest assured that we do ensure that we follow up those letters, and we do asset inspections, and we can use enforcement and our powers to get that asset necessary.
Yeah, maybe not the details, Joe, but certainly number of assets, you know, what sort of stage of critical are they, you know, are they medium risk, are they low risk, are they high risk? You know, we don't want names and addresses. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking for numbers, just so we've got an idea of where that sits in the bigger picture. Thank you.
Councillor Scully wants to come in. Councillor Gallagher.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we can do something for the next meeting that basically looks at the assets which are maintained by the Environment Agency, the assets of the council, and of course the Canals and Rivers Trust may well be prepared to share some of that information with us. Can I add in, of course, I don't know if Granville's still with us, but of course there are also the reservoir assets and other assets that Yorkshire Water have. It's a complex picture, but I'm sure we will be able to bring something to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Scullion. Mike?
Sorry, Chair. We've got notes of all those, and we can certainly work those up for the agenda, and also to report back earlier by written briefing notes on some of the issues that have been raised this evening.
Yeah, it'd be good to hear about you know, the report back in terms of the mental health, what Councillor Press and Councillor Paston-Hulse are asking, but I don't think we should wait for the 6 months, to be fair. Okay. Sorry, Mike.
No, sorry, that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Andrew, sorry.
Okay.
And Angie, I'm just wondering, I'm happy to have a meeting sooner, you know, I know that every 6 months is because we haven't had a flood and stuff, but mental health is, as Councillor Press has said, you know, it's really affecting people now as we move into the...
Yeah, why can't we, is there any protocol why we can't have another meeting?
I'm happy to have another meeting if anybody else wants to, you know, to do that, or I don't know how it gets organised. Can you help us on that, Mike?
Councillor Scullion's indicating as well, but we try, Neil and myself work to make sure that we sort of coordinate the timings of meetings with the Flood Resilience Board, so that we neither duplicate nor put too much pressure on particularly partner organisations, colleagues from Yorkshire Water and the Environment Agency. but I can talk with Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Press after the meeting, and Neil about timings for the meeting. Yes.
Just twice a year just not seem adequate to me. Just doesn't seem adequate.
Councillor Scullion.
Chair, this is a scrutiny committee that's slightly different from the other scrutiny committees. But actually, other scrutiny committees do have sometimes additional meetings, particularly task and finish groups, which look at one particular topic. And I wonder if perhaps the issue of mental health is one of those topics. So rather than wait till the next meeting, there should be a group of drawn from this scrutiny committee that takes a deep dive, as it were, into that particular issue at a meeting, has the right people in front of it, asks the questions and gets the reassurances that it needs, and then reports back to the wider scrutiny committee. Just a suggestion, because that's what scrutiny committees do in the other areas.
In terms of the issue that we're talking about here, Mike, would we need a full meeting? Could we not have an ad hoc meeting with a report on the mental health?
Could we invite? Oh, sorry.
There's no reason if the scrutiny panel decides they want to do that, we could arrange that. We could either arrange we could arrange an ad hoc meeting, or we could arrange, as Councillor Scullion suggested, a group of 3 or 4 members of the scrutiny panel to perhaps have a meeting with people more closely informed about the mental health position. But there's no reason why we couldn't do that.
Yeah, that sounds a fair compromise. Who's going to volunteer for that? Bear in mind, volunteers get shot first.
Okay. I can see Councillor Preston, Councillor Parsons Folsom, Councillor Gallagher.
And maybe, invite people from Healthy Minds, CCG. I don't know. I don't even know what. Mike, can I just check with you? Would this come under more adult health and social care, or not? I'm asking because I don't know.
I'm thinking off the top of my head, Chair, but I think if it relates to the particular the impact of flooding or worries about flooding, then it would fit with this scrutiny panel.
Right. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I was just thinking there, Mike. We've got to be cautious here and not to, mirror image what any other group is doing, in order to be progressive with this.
I think that's right.
I know that funding for mental health is a thing, isn't it? But funding for mental health with flooding, I don't know. Is that a different issue? I don't know.
Yeah, Angie, I think it's fair enough. This is an issue that has been bubbling under for quite a while now, and concerns have been expressed before. And maybe we shouldn't be particularly specific about one organisation. I'd be wary about that, because then we might find ourselves hostages to fortune. But I do think it's really, really important that we find out. I heard a lot about conversations, but I didn't hear much about practical steps being taken to sort this problem out. So that's my concern. So I think it's fair enough in this context to zoom in on this one thing. Because it was, when I was on the bigger panel, we talked about this all the time. It's all about our Vision 2024, the kindness thing. All that stuff means nothing if we're not funding the agencies. And that doesn't necessarily mean Healthy Minds, it could be somebody else. If we're not funding those agencies that get out there and help people, then we just talk.
Can we take it as a next step then? Okay, so we've got the volunteers, we've got Councillor Press, Councillor Parsons, myself. Do we need anybody else? Oh, Katie, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I'm just gonna so I obviously don't mind being on that at all, because it's on my agenda. It's part of the flood action plan. It's the action that has come from the plan. Would it be helpful as well? We So the actions that we've been chasing with public health over the last few years have actually came from the scrutiny panel. Some of you probably remember, and I've been hunting them down for a while. And there were a set of recommendations that came originally from Paul Butcher, who's Director of Public Health. As Isaac mentioned, we are now in contact with Public Health, the Director and the team there, and we'll be having another meeting with them in November to get further updates on that. But we also have reporting from Healthy Minds as well, which was part of the money that we gave to them to do the programme in the Upper Valley. So there was 2 separate actions in the action plan. There was an action for Todmorden, and as far as I'm aware, Healthy Minds still operating Todmorden as part of the action plan, specifically for mental health in relation to flooding. From that, we asked that we have it further up the valley, so covering Myvenroyd, Brayley, Hebden Bridge, some of the villages on the, the uplands, as well as the valley bottom, which we felt was really important. So we do have some reporting to show numbers and measures, and how effective it's been. I think it's important that you understand that as well, that those things that we were measuring were all taken care of, and that it was actually effective to do that work with Healthy Minds, who was the charity that we chose at the time. So there's lots of things going on around that at the moment, and I think you need the context to see what we've been doing over the past couple of years and see how we can push that forward. But it originated through scrutiny, but it's been in action on the action plan from the very beginning as a need for the community.
Hi, Katie. Chair, can I comment on that? Because I've heard the work that has been done by Healthy Minds has been fabulous up in Todmorden, and I'm aware that some of those groups have been told now that their funding's finished and they're going to have to stop. I think one of the things especially within mental health, is the trust that's built up in those groups. It's very, very hard for people to show up, first of all, to say, hey, I've got a problem, build those relationships, and then be told that actually it's all finished, so you're sort of taking people through an emotional journey there. And I think I would really like to see, because I've been told that those groups are finished, I'd really like to see some of those groups that have been established already to be supported, and if we can keep in touch with those people that have made those relationships, it's really important to support the ones that have already showed up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Mike?
So I think I've got the note of the names of the people who volunteered to be involved, and we'll progress that work after, not this evening, but after this meeting.
Okay. I think we're at the end of the meeting now.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.